If there are two things that the pandemic has taught the world, it's to appreciate one's health and those we love. Globally, close to 5.5 million people have died as a result of COVID-19, and this means that you or someone you may know have either lost a parent, a child, a spouse, or a friend. And with a rather clinical approach to funerals over the past 2 years, mourners are often left to grieve in isolation. A new trend of employing the services of a death doula could provide mourners with much-needed support. And for more on this, we're joined by death doula Vasha Suku. Thank you so much for joining us, Vasha. As I understand, a doula is somebody who helps you to give birth. Do you help people transition from life to death at the bedside, or do you come in after the person has passed on?
So different death doulas have different ways of doing things. There are some who are there during the transition. They help a person to cross over, to cope with the impending death. But then you also have death doulas who are there to support the family, because obviously there are people who are still alive and who still survive the death of a loved one. So I do both. I think there are a lot of death doulas out there around the world who do both. They help people who come to terms with a terminal illness. So it doesn't just have to be COVID. It can be leukemia, cancer, a brain aneurysm, or something else that is terminally ill that someone has to deal and cope with, as well as the family.
Vasha, in those final moments, or as the person is trying to transition or is about to die, what do you find their biggest challenge is and the hardest part is for both the patient and the family?
Oh, that is a tough one. It's always difficult because people have a lot of regret. In those last moments, it's all the things that they wish they could have said, wish they could have mentioned or done. There is often a lot of concern and worry for the loved ones that they're leaving behind, especially if it is someone who is a young parent, or someone who has parents and is the only breadwinner in the family. There is this concern of what happens to me after I pass on, what happens to others. So there's a concern for my family, there's a concern for my soul, what happens to me once I've left? Do I go to heaven? Am I reincarnated? You know, there's different belief systems. So it's the guilt, it's the concern for others, it's the regret, and it is the worry of what's next, because obviously there's no one to give us feedback and say, well, when you pass on, this is what happens to you.
What do you do to ease the process and to make it kinder and more peaceful?
So again, there are different ways that different doulas will do things. You have people who are nurses who will help from a medical perspective. I am an energy worker, a holistic healer, so I will use more along the lines of coaching. I'm also a shamanic practitioner, so we do talk about things from a spiritual perspective, you know, spiritual belief systems, whether it's Christianity, whether it's Islam, whether it's Hinduism, but just having that sense of comfort of knowing spiritually I'm prepared for what's to come. Emotionally, I'm getting myself prepared and ready. And it's the same with the family, because there are strong belief systems around funerals, around death, and families are the ones that have to continue after that, whether it's rituals, whether it's planning a funeral. So it's really just helping them along from a spiritual, from a mental, from an emotional perspective. There are obviously other aspects, like if you're a medically trained nurse, helping from a medical perspective, you know, what comes next. If you work in the holistic field, it's how do you deal with your anxiety post the death, the person who is passing away. You know, breath work. I know it sounds like such a silly thing to mention when you're on your deathbed, but just being able to find that calm center to be able to pass on in a peaceful manner can be very difficult. I mean, there's so much of overwhelming emotions and thoughts behind the death process for the person who's passing away, as well as for the family members. Breath work is so important.